Rome is one of those cities that cannot be described through a few famous landmarks or a few pages in a history textbook. Here, the past is not separated from the present. It continues to exist alongside modern life, remaining part of the urban landscape, everyday routes, and habits of millions of people who pass ancient walls every day. Step into small cafes on the ground floors of centuries-old buildings, work, study, meet friends, and naturally accept what becomes a true discovery for most visitors. Every year, tens of millions of travelers come here dreaming of seeing the Colosseum, walking through ancient squares, tossing a coin into the Trevi Fountain, or climbing one of Rome's hills. Yet after just a few hours of walking around, it becomes clear that the city's main value lies not only in its famous architectural monuments, but in a special atmosphere that has been forming for more than 2,000 years and continues to take shape today, thanks to the people who live their ordinary lives here. Rome has never turned into an open-air museum, despite its enormous number of historical monuments, archaeological sites, and ancient structures. The city is constantly developing, changing, welcoming new residents, and opening modern restaurants, universities, offices, and cultural spaces, while still preserving respect for its own past, a past that can be felt on almost every street and has become a natural part of the urban environment. Here, in just a few minutes, you can walk from ancient ruins to a busy shopping district, see an old church next to a modern bookstore, a family bakery, and a noisy square filled with locals spending the evening in unhurried conversation, meeting after work, walking with children, or simply enjoying a warm Roman evening without paying much attention to the fact that they are surrounded by structures that have survived countless eras. That is why getting to know Rome cannot begin only with history or only with the present day. This city exists in several layers of time at once, each one helping explain the next. It allows us to understand how a small settlement on the banks of the Tiber River first became the center of a vast empire, then the spiritual capital of the Catholic world, and today remains one of the most visited and recognizable cities on the planet, preserving its unique atmosphere and its own rhythm of life, one that cannot be confused with any other European city. In this journey, we will trace Rome's path from its earliest settlements to the modern capital of Italy. We will explore its history, learn how Romans live today, discover which traditions continue to be passed down from generation to generation, understand why local cuisine has long become part of world culture, and see how a city that is almost 3,000 years old continues to remain alive, dynamic, and surprisingly modern. The story of Rome begins long before the first stone temples, wide roads, and magnificent palaces appeared. Long before this place became the center of a vast state, small communities of farmers and shepherds lived along the banks of the Tiber River. They chose the low hills for settlement because they offered protection from seasonal floods while providing clear views of the surrounding countryside. These lands occupied a strategic crossroads connecting the central Italian peninsula with the coast, gradually attracting craftsmen, merchants, and travelers who brought with them new knowledge, goods, and cultural traditions. Even today, a glance at the city map reveals that Rome's historic core is spread across the famous Seven Hills, each of which was once an independent settlement with its own inhabitants, customs, and modest fortifications. Over time, these settlements began to unite, as cooperation offered greater opportunities for trade, defense, and growth. Their advantageous location also allowed them to control an important crossing over the Tiber, which was already vital to the people of central Italy. For centuries, the story of Rome's founding was passed down not only through historical records, but also through legends that became an essential part of Italy's cultural heritage. The best known of these is the tale of the brothers Romulus and Remus. According to ancient tradition, the twins were abandoned by the river shortly after birth, where they were rescued by a she-wolf who nursed them. Later, they were raised by a shepherd and his family. As adults, they decided to establish a city on the very spot where they had been saved. However, a dispute over which hill should become the city's location and who should rule it ended in tragedy. Romulus became the sole founder of the new settlement, giving it his own name. Modern historians view this legend primarily as a powerful symbol of the city's birth. Archaeological evidence suggests that the unification of the early settlements was a gradual process that unfolded over a long period of time. Nevertheless, the legend remains an important part of Roman culture, and the image of the she-wolf nursing the two infants has become one of the city's most recognizable symbols. It can be found in public squares, museums, souvenirs, and even in the emblems of local sports teams. The earliest inhabitants of what would become Rome were farmers who cultivated grain, raised livestock, fished in the Tiber, and gradually mastered the crafts needed to build homes, make tools, and trade with neighboring settlements. Their houses were simple, the streets were narrow and unplanned, and daily life revolved around nature, harvests, and the changing seasons. Yet it was during this period that the foundations of a society were laid, one that, within a few centuries, would become one of the most influential civilizations in human history. Rome's location between the many peoples of the Italian peninsula played a crucial role in its early development. To the north lived the Etruscans, whose influence on architecture, engineering, and religious practices was profound. To the south were the Greek colonies, which introduced the achievements of classical culture, philosophy, and commerce. Meanwhile, the numerous tribes of central Italy constantly interacted, exchanging goods, technologies, and military experience. From the very beginning, Rome absorbed the strengths of many different cultures, gradually developing its own systems of government, construction, and public life. As the settlement grew, the first defensive walls, public gathering places, and religious sanctuaries began to appear, becoming the heart of community life. With a growing population came the need for more sophisticated systems of government, the distribution of responsibilities, and the maintenance of public order. During this period, Rome's earliest state institutions took shape, allowing the once small settlement to develop into a thriving city capable of defending its interests and expanding its influence over neighboring territories. According to traditional chronology, Rome was founded in 753 BC. Although this date is largely symbolic, it marks the beginning of the history of one of the world's most famous cities. Over the following centuries, the small settlement gradually evolved into the center of an increasingly powerful state that first conquered neighboring lands, then united most of the Italian peninsula, and eventually extended its influence far beyond the borders of modern Italy. The road to global power, however, was anything but quick. During its first centuries, Rome faced constant struggles for resources, conflicts with neighboring tribes, internal reforms, and the search for a political system capable of preserving the unity of a growing state. It was during these formative years that the traditions of Roman political life, military organization, and social structure were established, traditions that would later become the foundation of the Roman Republic and influence the development of countless European nations for centuries to come. After the reign of Rome's early kings came an entirely new era, one that transformed not only the city itself, but also shaped its destiny for centuries to come. At the end of the 6th century BC, the monarchy was abolished, and the government gradually passed into the hands of elected magistrates and the Senate, marking the beginning of the Roman Republic. For its time, this political system proved remarkably stable. It balanced the interests of different social classes, allowed laws to evolve over time, and provided the flexibility needed to govern a state that continued to grow with every passing decade. As the new system of government took shape, everyday life in the city changed as well. The population expanded, new neighborhoods appeared beyond the old districts, and roads, warehouses, workshops, and marketplaces were built. Public squares gradually became the centers of political, economic, and cultural life. It was here that government affairs were debated, business deals were concluded, court cases were heard, and citizens gathered, making the forum the heart of daily life and the setting for many of Rome's most important events. The Romans devoted particular attention to their military, understanding that the security of the state depended not only on defensive walls, but also on a well-organized army. Military service gradually became an essential duty of free male citizens, while discipline, a clear chain of command, and rigorous training enabled the Roman legions to campaign successfully across a wide variety of territories. Their victories brought not only new lands, but also wealth, trade routes, valuable resources, and thousands of new inhabitants who became part of the expanding Roman state. Over time, Rome established control over nearly the entire Italian peninsula. Once that goal had been achieved, the Republic turned its attention to the broader Mediterranean. Long wars followed against powerful rivals, most notably Carthage, which dominated much of the region's maritime trade. Rome's victory in these conflicts opened extraordinary new opportunities, transforming the Republic into the leading political and military power of the Mediterranean. The city itself grew rapidly in wealth as goods, taxes, and skilled craftsmen poured in from every corner of the known world. Rome's influence eventually spread across the territories of modern-day Spain, France, Greece, Turkey, Egypt, the Balkans, North Africa, and the Middle East. This vast state united dozens of peoples who spoke different languages and followed diverse traditions. Yet Rome's administrative system made it possible to govern these enormous territories under a single authority. Across the provinces, roads, bridges, government buildings, theaters, and aqueducts were constructed, while Roman law, architecture, and ways of life spread alongside them. One of Rome's greatest achievements was its network of roads, which eventually stretched across almost the entire empire. Built with exceptional skill and durability, many sections remained in use for centuries after the fall of ancient Rome. These roads allowed armies to move quickly, goods to be transported efficiently, communication between provinces to flourish, and trade to expand. As a result, Rome became the hub of an immense transportation network, welcoming merchants, officials, diplomats, craftsmen, and travelers from across the empire every day. As the empire expanded, so did the population of its capital. While Rome had been a relatively modest city during its earliest centuries, by the beginning of the Common Era, it was home to hundreds of thousands of people. Some historians estimate that at the height of its power, its population exceeded 1 million residents. For the ancient world, this was an astonishing figure, requiring highly sophisticated systems for supplying food, water, and construction materials. To meet the needs of such a massive population, dozens of aqueducts were built to carry fresh water from distant sources into the city. This water flowed into public fountains, bathhouses, residential neighborhoods, and workshops, creating a level of urban infrastructure that was considered one of the greatest engineering achievements of the ancient world. Many elements of this remarkable system were designed so skillfully that some of the original structures still survive today, serving as lasting reminders of Roman engineering excellence. As wealth increased, so did the city's appearance. Old buildings gave way to magnificent temples, spacious public squares, monumental civic structures, and luxurious homes owned by wealthy citizens. These residences were decorated with marble, elegant columns, private gardens, and fountains. Yet alongside these grand estates stood neighborhoods where craftsmen, merchants, and laborers lived and worked. Even then, Rome was a complex and highly diverse city where wealth, luxury, and the everyday lives of hundreds of thousands of ordinary people existed side by side. By the beginning of the imperial era, Rome had firmly established itself as the heart of a vast empire whose influence reached across nearly the entire Mediterranean world. From here, decisions were made that determined the fate of millions. Legions departed on distant campaigns, the riches of the provinces flowed into the capital, and works of art, rare goods, and new knowledge arrived from every corner of the empire. Gradually, Rome became not only the political center of the ancient world, but also one of its greatest cultural capitals. It was during this remarkable period that construction began on many of the monuments which, 2,000 years later, remain the enduring symbols of Rome and continue to attract millions of visitors every year. The city had reached the height of its prosperity, and its streets, squares, and public buildings created the impression of a magnificent capital where government, commerce, religion, art, and everyday life blended together into a vibrant and thriving metropolis. At the height of its glory, Rome was no longer simply the capital of a vast empire. It had become one of the largest cities of the ancient world, where life never truly stopped. Day and night, its streets were filled with government officials, merchants, craftsmen, soldiers, philosophers, travelers, and people from every corner of the empire who had come for countless different reasons. For many, Rome was the place where matters of state were decided, major business agreements were made, works of art were created, and the future of an empire stretching across 3 continents was shaped. At the heart of the city stood the Roman Forum. Far more than just a large public square, it served as the center of civic life, surrounded by the Senate House, temples, administrative buildings, and shops. Every day, people gathered here to debate political issues, attend court proceedings, hear new laws proclaimed, and take part in ceremonial events. From sunrise until late evening, the Forum was alive with activity. Every Roman found themselves here from time to time, because this was where politics, commerce, religion, and everyday life intersected. Nearby rose magnificent temples dedicated to the many gods of the Roman Pantheon, each playing an important role in daily life. Religion accompanied Romans through virtually every stage of existence, from birth to state celebrations, and religious ceremonies were an ordinary part of city life. Priests performed sacred rituals, offerings were made to the gods, solemn processions filled the streets, and participation in these events was considered a natural responsibility of every citizen. Among the greatest achievements of Roman civilization were the public bathhouses, or thermae. It is difficult to think of them simply as places to bathe. These enormous complexes were social hubs where people spent much of their free time. Friends met to catch up, citizens discussed the latest news, exercised in gymnasiums, visited libraries, strolled through landscaped gardens, or simply relaxed after a day's work. The baths combined many different functions, making them public centers that welcomed people from every social class and buzzed with activity throughout the day. The city's marketplaces were equally important. Here, vendors sold food, textiles, jewelry, pottery, furniture, spices, and goods imported from virtually every corner of the empire. Egypt supplied grain, Spain was known for its metals, Gaul exported wine, while the eastern provinces brought luxurious fabrics, perfumes, and precious gemstones. A walk through a Roman market offered a glimpse into the remarkable wealth and diversity of lands ruled by Rome. The constant movement of people and merchandise made the city extraordinarily vibrant, while the many languages spoken in its streets reflected the immense size of the empire. Rome's residential neighborhoods varied dramatically. Wealthy families lived in spacious private homes centered around courtyards, gardens, elegant colonnades, and fountains, with every detail reflecting the owner's status and prosperity. Most citizens, however, lived in multi-story apartment buildings known as insulae. Dozens of families often occupied a single building, and the upper floors were generally less comfortable due to the lack of running water and the difficulty of climbing long, narrow staircases. Despite these challenges, the insulae formed the backbone of Rome's urban landscape, allowing enormous numbers of people to live within the city's limited space. Public entertainment occupied a special place in Roman society. Spectacles united people from every social class and became an essential part of civic culture. Massive amphitheaters and circuses regularly welcomed thousands of spectators eager to watch theatrical performances, athletic competitions, chariot races, and other public events. These occasions became citywide celebrations that people anticipated well in advance, and discussions about them often continued long after they had ended. The city's engineering infrastructure was equally remarkable. A sophisticated network of aqueducts supplied fresh water every day to fountains, bathhouses, and many residential districts. Roads, bridges, and an advanced sewer system created a level of urban development that remained unmatched in most European cities for centuries. Many engineering principles developed by Roman architects later became the foundation of construction practices throughout the world and profoundly influenced the history of architecture. Yet behind the monumental buildings and extraordinary wealth lay the ordinary rhythm of everyday life, with all its joys, hardships, and routines. At dawn, craftsmen opened their workshops, merchants displayed their goods, children attended school, bakers began preparing bread long before sunrise, builders raised new structures, and thousands of people hurried through the streets on their daily errands. In many ways, this bustling rhythm resembles that of today's great metropolitan cities. It was this ordinary daily life, filled with work, conversation, family responsibilities, and constant movement, that made Rome a living city rather than simply a collection of magnificent monuments. Today, much of ancient Rome lies hidden beneath the modern city. Yet archaeological excavations continue to uncover forgotten streets, houses, public squares, and civic buildings, allowing us to imagine what the capital looked like during the height of its power. As visitors walk through the center of modern Rome, they often have no idea that entire ancient neighborhoods lie directly beneath their feet, streets where the citizens of the greatest empire of their age once walked, shaping the history of a city that, thousands of years later, remains one of the most extraordinary places on Earth. After exploring Rome's ancient past, it becomes especially fascinating to see what the city is like today. This is where it becomes clear that Rome has never frozen in time or turned into one enormous historical museum. Instead, it continues to live, evolve, and grow at its own pace. Today, Italy's capital is home to nearly 3 million people, welcomes hundreds of thousands of visitors every day, and remains the country's largest political, cultural, and economic center. Yet despite its size, Rome still feels remarkably human in scale and atmosphere. For most visitors, their first impression of Rome doesn't begin with a single famous monument. Even the drive from the airport reveals how incredibly diverse the city is. Modern residential neighborhoods gradually give way to historic districts. Broad boulevards narrow into winding streets, and ordinary apartment buildings are suddenly interrupted by ancient walls, centuries-old aqueducts, or quiet public squares that have existed for hundreds of years. This constant transition between different eras accompanies visitors throughout nearly every walk and gradually becomes one of Rome's defining characteristics. The historic center leaves a particularly powerful impression thanks to a street layout that has evolved over many centuries. Long, straight avenues and perfectly organized street grids are rare here. Instead, much of the city preserves its medieval structure. Narrow alleyways unexpectedly open onto spacious piazzas, quiet courtyards stand beside lively tourist routes, and behind the modest facade of an ordinary building there is often an ancient church or hidden courtyard with a history stretching back hundreds of years. One of the first things many visitors notice is the sound of the city. It is not the roar of skyscrapers or heavy industry, but the voices of people talking, the buzz of scooters, the clatter from neighborhood cafes, open windows, street musicians, and the constant movement across public squares. Rome feels like an exceptionally conversational city because people genuinely spend a great deal of time together. Friends meet over coffee, neighbors chat, and much of everyday life unfolds outdoors, especially during the warmer months. Another defining feature is the architecture itself. Modern high-rise buildings are almost impossible to find in the city center, where historic preservation laws strictly protect the skyline. Most buildings rise only a few stories high, and their facades glow with warm shades of ochre, terracotta, sand, and cream. These colors create a remarkable visual harmony throughout the city. Signs of age are visible on nearly every building, but rather than detracting from their beauty, they give Rome a character that simply cannot be recreated. As you continue exploring, you begin to notice the details that rarely appear in guidebooks but define the city's personality. Balconies overflow with flowers and small lemon trees. Laundry hangs above narrow streets. Craftsmen continue working in tiny workshops, while owners of family-run shops know their regular customers by name. In many neighborhoods, there remains a genuine sense of community where neighbors greet one another, discuss local news, and cross paths almost every day. The city's countless piazzas occupy a special place in daily life, serving as natural gathering spaces. Children play there after school, elderly residents relax on benches, young people meet in the evenings, musicians perform for passers-by, and cafes gradually fill with customers throughout the day. For Romans, the piazza is far more than an attractive public space. It is an extension of everyday life, somewhere people can meet friends or simply pause for a while amid the rhythm of the city without needing any special occasion. Despite welcoming millions of tourists every year, Rome never feels like a city that exists solely for visitors. Walk just a few blocks away from the most famous landmarks, and everyday life immediately comes into view. Parents walk their children to school, office workers hurry to work, neighborhood bakeries open their doors, local markets begin trading, and residents shop for fresh ingredients at the same stores their families have visited for generations. It is in these ordinary moments that you realize Rome's celebrated monuments occupy only a small part of an enormous city whose daily life continues much as it always has. Modern Rome possesses a remarkable ability to blend the ancient and the contemporary without any sense of contradiction. An ancient column may stand beside a city bus stop. A centuries-old palace may now house a government office. Buildings constructed hundreds of years ago continue to serve as apartment homes. History is not isolated behind museum walls. It is woven naturally into the urban landscape. As a result, walking through Rome becomes not only an architectural experience, but also an opportunity to witness how one of Europe's oldest cities continues to thrive in the 21st century. Although most visitors spend nearly all their time within the historic center, the real Rome extends far beyond the Colosseum, the Pantheon, Piazza Navona, and the Trevi Fountain. The modern city consists of dozens of neighborhoods, each with its own personality, architecture, rhythm of life, and atmosphere. The farther you venture from the familiar tourist routes, the more clearly you begin to appreciate just how diverse and multifaceted Italy's capital truly is. The historic center remains the heart of Rome not only because of its extraordinary concentration of architectural landmarks, but also because it has served for centuries as the city's political, religious, and cultural core. Today, these streets are home to museums, government institutions, family-owned restaurants, bookstores, art galleries, and dozens of charming piazzas that are rarely empty. Early each morning, the first visitors begin to arrive. By midday, the streets fill with guided tours and travelers from around the world. As evening approaches, however, the city gradually returns to its residents, who come out after work to stroll through neighborhoods that have belonged to them for generations. One of modern Rome's best-known neighborhoods is Trastevere, located on the western bank of the Tiber River. Its name literally means across the Tiber, but today it is regarded as one of the city's most vibrant and atmospheric districts. Narrow cobblestone streets, intimate piazzas, centuries-old houses with wooden shutters, countless restaurants, cafes, and artisan workshops create the feeling of a neighborhood where life has changed very little over the decades. During the day, Trastevere feels peaceful and relaxed. After sunset, however, it comes alive as small bars open their doors, musicians gather in the squares, and friends meet over long dinners. A completely different atmosphere awaits in the Prati district, located near Vatican City. Here, the streets are noticeably wider, and the buildings reflect the elegant architectural style of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The overall layout feels far more orderly than that of the historic center. Government offices, business headquarters, boutiques, and residential buildings occupied mainly by middle-class families define the neighborhood. Prati is often chosen by visitors who want to experience a less tourist-oriented side of Rome, while remaining within easy reach of the city's major landmarks. Equally fascinating is the Testaccio neighborhood, which many Romans consider one of the capital's most authentic districts. Once the location of a major commercial port where goods from across the Mediterranean arrive, Testaccio is now famous for its lively markets, family-owned restaurants, and deep respect for traditional Roman cuisine. Many locals prefer spending their evenings here, meeting friends for dinner in an atmosphere that remains far calmer than the city's busiest tourist areas. A completely different side of Rome can be seen in the Euro district, developed much later than the historic center and representing another chapter of the city's history. Wide boulevards, expansive public squares, modern office buildings, exhibition halls, and generous green spaces create the impression of a contemporary business district. Many large corporations, government institutions, and modern museums are based here. Thousands of people commute to Euro every day for work, while curious visitors discover a side of Rome that is rarely featured in traditional guidebooks. Life in many residential neighborhoods far from the historic center looks very different from what most travelers imagine. Tour groups are rare here. Instead, everyday life revolves around neighborhood schools, grocery stores, sports fields, local markets, and family-owned businesses that have often operated for generations. In the mornings, parents walk their children to school, cafe owners greet familiar customers, and neighbors stop to chat outside bakeries or produce shops. It is here that the everyday rhythm of Rome becomes most visible, a side of the city that remains largely unseen by most visitors. Rome's parks deserve special attention as well. They occupy a significant portion of the capital and play an important role in daily life. Parks such as Villa Borghese and Villa Doria Pamphilj have long served as favorite gathering places where residents go jogging, ride bicycles, enjoy family picnics, or simply spend time outdoors. For many Romans, these green spaces are just as essential to city life as the historic piazzas and world-famous monuments. Gradually, it becomes clear that Rome cannot be reduced to a handful of famous streets or iconic attractions. Every neighborhood adds another layer to the city's identity. Some preserve the atmosphere of medieval Rome, others reflect the energy of a modern European capital, while still others maintain the quiet pace of life that has changed little over the decades. This diversity is what makes Rome so compelling, allowing every visitor to discover a version of the city entirely different from anyone else's. Perhaps that is why so many people return to Rome again and again. Each visit brings new routes to explore and new neighborhoods that rarely appear on postcards or in travel brochures. The longer you spend in the city, the more you realize that Rome's true soul is found not only among its famous monuments, but also in its ordinary courtyards, neighborhood cafes, morning markets, leafy parks, and quiet streets where millions of people continue to live their everyday lives. For them, Rome is not a museum, it is simply home. To truly understand Rome, it is not enough to admire its architecture or visit its most famous landmarks. The character of any city is shaped first and foremost by the people who fill it with life every single day. It is the Romans who create the atmosphere that cannot be artificially reproduced, an atmosphere built on habits, family traditions, attitudes toward work, leisure, and human connection that have been preserved for generations. The day in Rome begins surprisingly early. From the first hours of the morning, neighborhood bakeries, pastry shops, and cafes open their doors, welcoming locals on their way to work. For many Romans, this morning ritual is an essential part of everyday life. They order a cup of espresso, enjoy a fresh pastry, exchange a few words with the barista or familiar customers, and continue on with their day. These brief encounters happen day after day, allowing cafe owners to know their regulars by name. The cafe becomes more than simply a place to buy coffee. It becomes part of the neighborhood itself. As the workday begins, the city's rhythm gradually changes. Streets fill with cars, buses, scooters, and bicycles. Shops, offices, government buildings, and markets open their doors. Yet despite being a major European capital, Rome rarely feels like a city in constant haste. Even during rush hour, life moves at a noticeably slower pace than in many other capitals. Most residents try not to turn every minute into an endless race between work and personal life. Family continues to occupy a central place in the lives of most Romans. Relatives often live close to one another, gather regularly on weekends, help raise each other's children, and spend much of their free time together. Sunday lunch remains one of the city's strongest traditions, observed regardless of age, profession, or income. Several generations gather around the same table, discuss the events of the past week, prepare favorite family recipes, and enjoy hours of conversation. These meals are not viewed as obligations, but as one of the most natural and cherished parts of everyday life. Children traditionally occupy the center of family life in Italy. Parents, grandparents, and extended family members all play active roles in their upbringing. After school, children can often be seen playing in parks, gathering in public squares, or attending sports clubs accompanied by family members. In the evenings, many families go for walks together, giving children time outdoors while adults enjoy meeting friends and neighbors. This is one of the reasons Rome's public spaces remain lively well into the evening. Leisure is valued just as highly. After work, many Romans do not head straight home. Instead, they meet friends, stroll through their favorite neighborhood, stop by a local cafe, or spend time in one of the city's many piazzas. Such gatherings rarely require a special occasion. Conversation itself is considered an essential part of daily life. Sharing a coffee or enjoying an evening walk allows people to maintain close relationships and remain connected to their community. Respect for local traditions also remains deeply rooted. Even in this modern metropolis, many residents continue buying groceries from family-owned shops, shopping at neighborhood markets, purchasing bread from the same bakery, or ordering meat from a trusted butcher. Large supermarkets and shopping malls certainly exist, but supporting local businesses remains an important part of Roman culture. This helps preserve the sense of trust and neighborhood identity that has gradually disappeared from many large cities around the world. Romans also maintain a unique relationship with their own city. Ancient monuments have long become part of the everyday landscape, yet this familiarity has never turned into indifference. On the contrary, many residents see the city's historical heritage as a natural extension of their daily lives and treat it with great respect. No one finds it unusual for an apartment building to stand beside ancient walls or for a daily commute to pass monuments that are thousands of years old. This coexistence feels entirely natural and has become an essential part of Rome's identity. Soccer occupies an equally important place in city life. Whenever Rome's clubs play, the atmosphere changes noticeably. Streets fill with supporters, cafes broadcast matches, and conversations between friends and coworkers inevitably turn to the latest results. For many families, supporting a particular club is a tradition passed down from one generation to the next, strengthening family bonds while connecting the wider community. Despite welcoming millions of visitors each year, Romans have successfully preserved their traditional way of life rather than reshaping the city solely for tourism. Walk just a short distance away from the major attractions, and you'll discover ordinary apartment courtyards, neighborhood schools, sports fields, local markets, and family-run restaurants where customers know the owners personally and waiters remember the preferences of regular guests. It is in these places that the true character of Rome becomes most apparent, a city shaped not only by 2,000 years of history, but also by millions of ordinary human stories unfolding every single day. Thanks to its people, Rome remains a place where past and present exist side by side. The historic buildings provide the backdrop, but it is the residents who bring the city to life. They continue to work, raise families, meet friends, and preserve traditions that long predate the modern world. Perhaps that is the true secret behind Rome's unforgettable atmosphere, one that stays in people's memories long after photographs of its famous landmarks have faded. It is impossible to talk about the lives of Romans without talking about food. In Italy, cooking, family meals, and everyday dining habits have long been woven into the fabric of national culture. For the people of Rome, food is far more than a way to satisfy hunger. It brings people together, shapes the rhythm of the day, creates opportunities to gather, and preserves traditions that have been passed down through families for generations. The morning for many Romans begins with a visit to a neighborhood bar. In Italy, however, a bar is quite different from what the word typically means elsewhere. It is essentially a cozy cafe where people stop before work for a quick breakfast and a cup of coffee. Many visit the same place every day, allowing the staff to know their regular customers by name. It is not uncommon for a barista to begin preparing someone's usual order before they even reach the counter. The drink of choice is, of course, espresso. In Rome, espresso is simply part of everyday life. It is usually enjoyed standing at the counter, served in a small cup, without lingering for long or turning the morning coffee into an elaborate ritual. For locals, these few quiet minutes before the workday begins offer a welcome pause, a chance to ease into the morning and exchange greetings with familiar faces they see almost every day. After coffee comes a light breakfast, most often consisting of sweet pastries. The display cases of Roman cafes are filled with dozens of varieties of croissants stuffed with pastry cream, chocolate, jam, or pistachio filling, alongside traditional Italian baked goods whose recipes have often remained in the same family for generations. To many visitors, such a breakfast may seem surprisingly modest, but for most Romans it is a perfectly ordinary part of daily life. The main meal of the day is usually lunch or dinner, when families have the opportunity to gather without rushing. Sunday lunch remains especially important and is considered one of Rome's strongest traditions. Relatives visit one another, spend hours around the table, talk about the events of the past week, and have no desire to leave in a hurry. Often, the time spent together is just as meaningful as the food itself. Roman cuisine differs noticeably from the culinary traditions found in other regions of Italy. It evolved over many centuries and was built largely around simple, locally available ingredients that ordinary people could afford. Many recipes originated with craftsmen, shepherds, and working-class families who created satisfying meals from seasonal products without relying on expensive ingredients or complicated cooking techniques. As a result, many classic Roman dishes contain surprisingly few ingredients, but each one must be of exceptional quality and prepared with careful attention to tradition. One of the city's most famous dishes is pasta alla carbonara, whose true origins remain the subject of debate among food historians. In its authentic Roman version, the dish contains no cream. Instead, it is prepared with pasta, eggs, aged Pecorino Romano cheese, guanciale, cured pork jowl, and freshly ground black pepper. Equally beloved are cacio e pepe, made simply with cheese and black pepper, and amatriciana, famous for its rich tomato sauce, and guanciale. These dishes appear on the menu of nearly every traditional Roman restaurant, although many locals insist that the best versions are still served in places where the recipes have remained unchanged for decades. Beyond pasta, Romans enjoy a wide variety of meat, vegetable, and legume dishes. Local markets offer fresh artichokes, zucchini, tomatoes, eggplants, herbs, and seasonal fruit throughout the year, providing the foundation for home cooking. Many families still prefer buying their ingredients from trusted vendors at neighborhood markets rather than supermarkets, where sellers know the origin of every product and are happy to explain its quality. Street food is another essential part of Rome's culinary culture. While walking through the city, it is common to find bakeries selling freshly baked pizza by the slice, cut into large rectangular pieces and sold by weight with a wide variety of toppings. Fried rice balls known as supply, freshly made sandwiches, pastries, and traditional Italian gelato are equally popular. Many small family-run shops continue making their gelato from scratch using natural ingredients and recipes that have been preserved for generations. It is impossible to imagine Rome without its countless restaurants. Yet locals rarely choose the most famous establishments located near major attractions. Instead, many prefer small family-owned trattorias where the owners personally welcome guests. Recipes remain within the family, and the menu may change very little over the course of many years. These are the places where visitors can truly appreciate Rome's culinary traditions and experience an atmosphere that is difficult to find in restaurants designed primarily for tourists. Even an evening stroll through Rome often includes a stop at a small cafe for dessert or gelato while watching city life unfold. For Romans, eating is inseparable from conversation, and meals are rarely rushed. Equal importance is given to both the food and the company around the table. This relaxed approach is one of the defining characteristics of Rome's dining culture, reminding people that even an ordinary dinner can become one of the most meaningful moments of the day. Through its cuisine, the character of Rome reveals itself especially clearly. The city has never sought to impress through overly elaborate recipes or extravagant presentation. Instead, it values outstanding ingredients, family traditions, and recipes that have stood the test of time. That is why so many visitors leave Rome carrying not only photographs of ancient monuments, but also memories of simple, beautifully prepared meals that help them understand the city just as deeply as its greatest historical landmarks. As you become familiar with Roman cuisine, family traditions, and everyday habits, you gradually begin to notice another aspect of the city, one that rarely appears in travel guides but plays a major role in the daily lives of its residents. It is the way people move through the city, how its public spaces are organized, and why the rhythm of Rome feels so different from that of many other European capitals. Rome covers a vast area, making a well-developed transportation system essential to everyday life. Every day, millions of residents travel to work, school, or personal appointments using the metro, buses, trams, commuter trains, cars, bicycles, and the iconic Italian scooters that have long become one of the city's most recognizable symbols. Despite the variety of transportation options, the historic center remains a place where walking is often the most practical and by far the most enjoyable way to get around. Rome's metro system was built much later than those of many other European capitals and still consists of only a few lines today. The reason has nothing to do with a lack of investment in public transportation. Instead, it reflects the city's extraordinary archaeological heritage. Nearly every new underground construction project is accompanied by extensive archaeological excavations, during which experts regularly uncover the remains of ancient streets, residential neighborhoods, temples, workshops, and public buildings. Some discoveries are so significant that construction plans must be revised or even temporarily halted to preserve these priceless pieces of history for future generations. Buses remain one of the city's most important forms of public transportation, connecting dozens of neighborhoods across the sprawling capital. For visitors, the network may initially seem complicated because of its large number of routes. Romans, however, have long adapted to the system and navigate it with ease. They also tend to accept occasional delays with remarkable patience, recognizing that heavy traffic, narrow historic streets, and the city's unique layout inevitably affect travel times. Scooters have become an inseparable part of Rome's urban landscape. They can be seen everywhere, from broad avenues to the narrow streets of the historic center. Their compact size allows riders to weave through congested traffic and find parking where cars cannot. For many Romans, scooters are not a lifestyle statement, but simply one of the most practical ways to navigate the city every day. Cars still play an important role in daily life, yet driving through central Rome requires considerable patience. Narrow streets, heavy tourist traffic, restricted access to historic districts, and frequent traffic jams often make driving inconvenient. As a result, many residents combine different modes of transportation or leave their cars outside the center and continue on foot. Walking, in fact, becomes the most natural way to experience Rome. The city seems designed to be explored without rushing, from one piazza to another, through hidden alleyways, quiet courtyards, and secluded gardens. It is nearly impossible to follow a carefully planned route because every few minutes something unexpected captures your attention: an ancient fountain, a small church, a charming bookstore, or a neighborhood bakery where locals patiently wait in line for fresh bread. Another defining feature of Rome is its abundance of public spaces where people spend their free time. Even on weekdays, parks, piazzas, and the embankments of the Tiber gradually fill with residents taking evening walks, exercising, meeting friends, or simply relaxing outdoors. The city becomes especially lively after sunset, when the daytime heat fades and the streets once again fill with people. During the warmer months, the Tiber riverfront transforms into one of Rome's favorite gathering places. Seasonal cafes open along the water, concerts are held, art exhibitions and food festivals take place, and numerous cultural events bring the riverbanks to life. Many residents come here after work to spend a few peaceful hours by the river, meet friends, or simply enjoy the cooler evening air. Evening in Rome deserves special attention because it is after sunset that the city reveals an entirely different personality. Tourist groups gradually disappear, the streets become quieter, families gather in the piazzas with their children, young people meet near fountains and cafes, restaurants fill with diners, and carefully designed architectural lighting gives ancient buildings a completely new appearance. At these moments, it becomes clear that Rome is a city that truly comes alive not only during the day, but also throughout its long, warm evenings, a time that many locals consider one of the greatest pleasures of living here. It is this unhurried rhythm that explains why so many travelers fall in love with Rome. The city does not seek to impress through speed or futuristic architecture. Its greatest strength lies in its ability to preserve its traditional way of life despite welcoming millions of visitors, remaining in constant motion, and carrying nearly 3,000 years of history. Perhaps that is why a simple walk through Rome's streets often leaves a deeper impression than visiting any single landmark. It is in the city's everyday life that its true character is most vividly revealed. After spending a few days in Rome, it becomes clear that the city lives not only in the present, but also through countless traditions that have survived despite the rapid pace of the modern world. Many customs, celebrations, and community events remain an essential part of everyday life, passed down within families and preserving the connection between generations that gives Rome such a powerful sense of cultural continuity. One of the city's defining characteristics is its deep respect for family traditions. Even in today's fast-paced urban environment, many residents make a point of spending weekends with parents, children, grandparents, and extended family. Large family gatherings remain a regular part of life. This is especially noticeable on Sundays, when, after a morning walk or attending church, families gather around the table, prepare traditional meals, catch up on the week's events, and spend several leisurely hours together. For many Romans, these gatherings are one of the most important parts of the week, helping preserve close relationships across generations. Religious holidays continue to play a major role in the city's life. Because Vatican City is located within Rome, millions of pilgrims travel here every year, particularly during Easter and Christmas. During these holidays, the atmosphere of the city changes dramatically. Public squares fill with worshipers and visitors, special religious services are held, festive lights decorate the streets, and churches become gathering places not only for believers, but also for anyone wishing to experience the unique spirit of these celebrations. Civic festivals celebrating the history and culture of the capital are equally important. Throughout the year, different neighborhoods host music festivals, food fairs, art exhibitions, open-air theatrical performances, and historical reenactments. Many of these events are organized by local communities themselves, bringing together residents from nearby neighborhoods. As a result, long-standing traditions continue to thrive not merely as tourist attractions, but as a genuine part of everyday Roman life. Summer brings a particularly vibrant cultural calendar. Concerts take place in public squares, historic palaces, parks, and archaeological sites. Open-air movie theaters remain active late into the night, while the banks of the Tiber transform into lively promenades lined with cafes, performance stages, art displays, and seasonal attractions. For Romans, these evenings provide the perfect opportunity to enjoy time with family and friends without ever leaving their own city. One tradition that deserves special mention is the evening stroll. After work, many Romans leave home not because they have somewhere specific to go, but simply to enjoy a walk, meet friends, and experience a change of scenery. People gather in piazzas, wander through familiar streets, stop at neighborhood cafes, exchange news, and spend hours outdoors. This custom has existed for generations and remains one of the defining features of Roman culture, ensuring that the city's public spaces remain lively long after sunset. Another uniquely Roman feature is the city's remarkable number of fountains, many of which still serve their original purpose. Scattered throughout Rome are hundreds of small public drinking fountains that provide fresh, clean water around the clock. Residents regularly use them while walking, exercising, or commuting across the city, while visitors are often surprised by how naturally free drinking water has remained part of Rome's public infrastructure. Rome is also famous for its cats, which have become unofficial residents of the Eternal City. For decades, they have lived among archaeological sites, ancient ruins, and historic walls under the care of volunteers and local organizations. Romans have long grown accustomed to sharing their city with these feline inhabitants, while many visitors discover them as one of Rome's most unexpected and memorable charms. Despite welcoming millions of visitors from around the world every year, Rome has managed to preserve its own identity without becoming consumed by the tourism industry. Beyond the major landmarks, family-owned shops, neighborhood bookstores, traditional workshops, and local markets continue operating much as they always have. It often takes only a few turns away from the busiest tourist routes to find yourself in a completely different Rome, one where visitors become scarce and everyday life takes center stage. Perhaps it is this remarkable ability to preserve tradition while embracing the present that makes Rome truly unique. New generations continue to grow up among ancient streets, gather in piazzas built centuries ago, meet beside historic fountains, and pass down customs that existed long before the invention of automobiles, subways, or smartphones. Because of this, Rome never feels like a city of monuments alone. Instead, it remains a living place where history survives not only inside museums, but also in the ordinary routines of daily life. That is why Rome leaves such a lasting impression. It cannot be remembered solely through photographs of the Colosseum or the Pantheon. The true experience of the city is found in slow walks through its streets, unexpected discoveries, conversations in neighborhood cafes, the evening sounds of bustling piazzas, and the unmistakable feeling that the past has never disappeared here. It has simply become part of the present. Perhaps that is why people return to Rome again and again, discovering a different city with every visit, while it continues living its unhurried life nearly 3,000 years after its founding.